So we've just talked briefly about the small intestine as a model for the 4 layers of the gut wall. Now, in this picture, the ileum, the small intestine, would be this part here, and it's about 20 feet long. So it's a very, very long structure you find inside the abdomen. But we know before the ileum, the first 20 centimeters of the small intestine is called the duodenum. So this is the first 20 centimeters of the small intestine. Now, we know the stomach sits before the small intestine. So it's at the end of the esophagus and it's before the small intestine. And we know inside the stomach we're going to get gastric juice. So anything to do with the stomach is called gastric. Now, it's the wall of the stomach called the gastric wall that secretes, it's got gastric glands within the mucosa layer that secretes hydrochloric acid and pepsinogen. Now, the pepsinogen, as we'll see in a minute, is an inactive endopeptidase, and it gets activated by hydrochloric acid. It cleaves off a portion of this inactive precursor to form the active pepsin. Now, we know inside the stomach there's going to be a pH of around about 2, so it kills any pathogens that you ingest on your food, and we also know pepsin has an optimum pH of around about pH 2. So we can actually see the 4 layers of the gut wall here. So we've got longitudinal layer of the muscularis on the outside. We've then got the circular layer beneath that. There is actually another layer here called the oblique layer. Now, underneath the muscularis, we will have the submucosa, and on the very inside we'll have the mucosa. Now, we can actually just briefly talk about again the sphincters here. So we know this one here is going to be the cardiac sphincter, and that controls the movement of the bolus of food from the esophagus down to the stomach. It also closes to prevent any backflow of acid, or it prevents acid reflux back up the esophagus. The pyloric sphincter is this one here, and that is, again, it's like a muscular valve, and it allows what we call gastric efflux. So when the pyloric sphincter opens, it allows the bolus of food with a little bit of the acid within it to move into the duodenum. It then closes. So it's called gastric emptying. Now, we know the duodenum, in the submucosa of the duodenum wall are Brunner's glands. And it's the Brunner's glands that secrete an alkaline mucus from the submucosa into the lumen of the duodenum, and that neutralizes the acidic food from the stomach. It also provides a protective layer of mucus for the enzymes, so they don't digest the epithelial cells that line the duodenum. Now, in this duodenum structure, so this first sort of 20 centimeters or so of the small intestine, we're going to see in a minute, we get 2 ducts that open into this. We get the duct called the bile duct, so the bile duct from the gallbladder, and here we get bile that goes into the duodenum, and bile emulsifies fats, and it also is alkaline to help neutralize the food from the stomach. Now, the other duct that goes into the duodenum is the pancreatic, so we can say pancreatic duct. And we know the pancreas makes pancreatic juice containing lots of digestive enzymes, things like trypsin and amylase and lipase from the pancreas. So we also get digestion occurring in the duodenum as well because of these pancreatic enzymes. Now, if we were to actually look at the wall of the stomach, we can see these gastric pits. So these little pits here, if you were to kind of go down them, you would see what we call gastric glands. So we know epithelial tissue is tissue that lines certain structures within the body. And if you go down the gastric gland here, what you'll see are certain specialized cells. So some specialized epithelial cells are called goblet cells, and they make, store, and then secrete mucus. Now, it's very important that mucus is secreted from these specialized goblet cells because it prevents the epithelial cells being digested through pepsin once that's been activated. Now, there's another type of specialized cell called oxyntic cells. So we can see them here in light blue. So these specialized oxyntic cells, they actually make hydrochloric acid. And that hydrochloric acid will make its way up to and into the stomach. So this would be hydrochloric acid made from oxyntic cells. So we say here, oxyntic cells. Now we know the hydrochloric acid is needed to kill off any pathogens that we might take in on our food, but it also helps to activate what we call pepsinogen, the inactive precursor to pepsin. So cells towards the bottom of the gastric gland are called chief cells. So we can see at the very bottom we've got lots of chief cells as part of the epithelium. So they're specialized epithelial cells, and they release pepsinogen into the gastric pit. So the pepsinogen comes up this way into the stomach. We know the acid cleaves off a portion of the pepsinogen to make it active pepsin, and we know pepsin is then going to start to break down protein within the bolus of food that's been taken in to the stomach. And we know pepsin, just as another recap, is an endopeptidase. We know it breaks down large or long polypeptide chains into shorter peptide fragments. So it's the first stage of protein digestion. Now, if you look at a microscope image of the stomach wall, this is what you'll see. So you can see the gastric pits here, lots of them. And we know they lead down to the gastric gland. So for example, here you'd have the epithelial lining, which you can kind of just see here. And that would go down, all the way down here, into the gastric gland. So we get that type of structure. So the gastric glands that make hydrochloric acid and also pepsinogen are located in the mucosa, so the very inner layer of the stomach wall. And underneath, or on the outside if you like, of the mucosa, we know we're going to get the submucosa, but the glands don't extend down into the submucosa, they're just the mucosa of the stomach wall. Now you can actually see some blood vessels, some veins, etc., and arteries within the submucosa. But the oxyntic cells that make hydrochloric acid and the chief cells that make pepsinogen are located here in the epithelium lining of the gastric pit, or gland if you like.